There's this saying, prostitution is the oldest profession. If that's the case, then why is it illegal in most of the United States? And why can't a woman sell something that is otherwise given away for free all the time? Individual liberties are a staple of a free society. It allows us to conduct our lives in whatever fashion we deem acceptable, regardless of the opinions or principles of others, so long as those choices do not infringe on the liberties of others. It is apparent that liberty was paramount at the inception of this nation, and the protection of those liberties, though how was greatly debated, were eventually guaranteed to us by our Constitution. It was a declaration of intent that our life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness would be the foundation of this country, and that those truths were self-evident. But in a nation that championed liberty from its birth, there are still many oppressions of personal choices which do not violate the personal rights of others. Many of those are under the conception of morality and a perverted notion that one's view of living is more acceptable and should be imposed on others. Sex work is work, plain and simple. It is an agreement between two or more consenting adults. It is dominated by women and allows for self-employment and self-empowerment. It's a way to make a career or a way to get by when times are rough. Sex work has been stigmatized for centuries as an uncivilized and amoral act. It has received derogatory terms aimed at the women themselves by political leaders, religious authorities, and the media. The terms prostitute, hookers, and whores garners a sense of degradation. This mindset leads to shame, ostracization, and estrangement of family members, and even the virtuous who oppose sex work, maintaining the mentality that is an effort to protect women's health and safety. Well, those are unfounded. It is completely disingenuous to oppose the decriminalization of sex work for reasons that purport to be for their safety, but is actually from a place of discomfort for the open engagement in sexual interactions for financial gain. This is not a position of morality, but one of control. Control of what women can and cannot do with their bodies. It emasculates men who feel that they have a need to protect women, and it threatens women because sex is such an intimate power that if it were freely available, it could heighten their insecurities. Decriminalizing sex work would be a huge step forward in fully recognizing the concept of liberty. Not only would it acknowledge that a woman can use her body under her own choice as a means of revenue, but it would also usher in a more safe and beneficial environment. Now, the derogatory, illegal nature towards prostitution pushes women into the unfettered underworld, which provides no protection and no support. Because prostitution is illegal in most areas, many women will not seek help or assistance if needed. And when they do, they are received with disdain and in some instances rejected help altogether. Police have had a history of overlooking these women, either downplaying reports of abuse or not giving full attention to reports of missing women. This neglect has made these women targets, and the illegalization of sex work actually puts them more at risk. We saw that more than ever in the 70s and 80s when serial killers specifically sought them out with knowledge that police would give little to no acknowledgement. By decriminalizing sex work, including prostitution, we allow these women to not be judged by their actions, and it provides a mentally freeing atmosphere in which women can receive medical treatment or police assistance without fear of jail time, fines, or any other punitive actions. Decriminalization would also decidedly reduce human trafficking and the use of pimps, handlers, and managers. These actions deprive women of choice and are forced into non-consensual sexual acts. There are some areas in the United States that has some form of legal prostitution. And like many other areas around the world, this legalized version is heavily regulated. Many European countries have adopted the Nordic model. This decriminalizes the act itself, but makes the buyers the illegal target, a form of end-user control. But even in these areas, it has not reduced the overall amount of prostitution. In fact, it provides even more obstacles for the women, because now that the buyer is the only one accountable for legal action, they are less likely to provide their true identity, or be more likely to threaten or use violence if a sexual act is refused by the woman. Under these legalized areas, the licensing and mandated regulations also tend to carry a high cost. And for those women who are not in it for a career, but only temporary to make ends meet, they are at an even greater risk. In 2003, New Zealand became the first and still only country to completely decriminalize prostitution. Before the Prostitution Reform Act was passed, their government and health officials spoke to sex workers directly on what they felt was the best way to protect them and their welfare. The overwhelming response was for full decriminalization, and that sentiment is shared by nearly all sex workers worldwide today. After nearly 2 decades since the PRA of 2003, New Zealand has seen no increase in human trafficking. The number of active sex workers has stayed the same, and 96% of all women in sex work claim to feel safer, better protected, and happier overall. Prostitution and human trafficking are not mutually exclusive. Human trafficking is a vile and repressive criminal act, and unfortunately, it is used in more than just sexual activity. Many are forced into manual labor. Those who made the clothes on your back, the electronics you're watching this on, whoever gave you a manicure, or those who tended your lawn, all could have been doing so under forced conditions. It is best to make laws targeting those direct abuses and not the industry itself. In 2004, 23 trafficking victims died in a horrific disaster in Morecambe Bay in the United Kingdom. These Chinese immigrants were exploited and sent out into the sandy estuary of the Kent Channel at night to collect cockles, a type of mollusk. They were completely unaware of the extreme fluctuation of the tides and were caught in its flow. Their death didn't call for the illegalization of cockle farming, nor should the criminalization of the sex industry. If anything, decriminalizing gives these workers more privileges and provides them the opportunity to maintain the same workers' rights you and I have today. It unequivocally provides them the means to legally protect themselves. This is not a left or right partisan issue. It is a human rights issue. It is the full acceptance of liberty, promoted by our Constitution and those same principles which have been supported by both Republicans and Democrats alike. Those who still wish to make prostitution and sex work political, well, for the left, this individual liberty is another example of women's empowerment. And for the right, this is a resounding endorsement for our personal liberty and the capitalistic ability for personal entrepreneurship. Detractors and skeptics of this would ask, would you want your daughter to be a sex worker or prostitute? This is the wrong question to ask. As a father to a daughter, I would support any endeavor she chooses to pursue, regardless of my personal opinion. The question I'm concerned with, and what all of us should be asking, is, if our daughters were in this industry, are they in the most safe situation possible? And the only way to ensure this is through complete decriminalization of all sex work. Change the stigma and recognize that sex work is just work.